Imagine giving a traumatized 24-year-old unlimited money, a private army, and the legal right to make your boss disappear. Rome did. What could possibly go wrong? Today we're doing a case study in absolute power, also known as when the universe hands a human being God mode and says, "Good luck with that." Our protagonist is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, which is the kind of name you get when your family tree is also a marketing department. He's better known as Caligula, meaning little boot, because as a kid he grew up around army camps wearing tiny soldier boots like a lethal Roman toddler cosplay. Cute, harmless, a future emperor who will definitely not become a walking warning label. But here's the twist. Caligula doesn't start as a cartoon villain. He starts as a political hope, the new beginning after a paranoid emperor. And then, the system around him, plus whatever's going on inside his skull, turns his reign into 4 years of fear, spectacle, and why is the government doing performance art again? So let's roll the tape, straight into the sandals and daggers era. Caligula is born in 12 AD, which is a fantastic year to be born if you enjoy empire-wide propaganda, family expectations, and the constant vibe that your relatives might poison each other at brunch. His dad is Germanicus, a wildly popular general, the kind of guy troops adore and politicians nervously smile at, like, haha, yes, you're totally not a threat to the throne. Caligula's childhood is basically army camp influencer life. He grows up on the frontier with soldiers, marching around in those little boots, caligae, so the troops nickname him Caligula. Picture a tiny mascot. Now picture that mascot someday controlling the entire state budget. But Rome isn't a feel-good sports movie. In 14 AD, Augustus dies, and the new emperor Tiberius takes over. Tiberius is complicated. He's competent, but increasingly unpopular and paranoid, like a manager who thinks every email is a coup attempt. Hello team, quick reminder, treason is due by Friday. Germanicus looks like the empire's bright future, which is exactly why his family becomes politically radioactive. When Germanicus dies in 19 AD under suspicious circumstances, ancient sources hint at poisoning, though we can't prove it, Caligula's world collapses. His mother, Agrippina, is eventually exiled. His brothers are destroyed by the system. And Caligula? He survives. Which sounds lucky until you realize surviving in Rome often meant becoming a very talented actor in the world's deadliest theater. And Little Boot is about to learn his lines. And then comes the invitation you can't decline. Hello, please come live with the man connected to your family's downfall. As a teenager, Caligula is summoned to Tiberius's villa on Capri, an island residence that later writers describe as a place of fear, excess, and the emperor's total control. Now, quick historian note, sources like Suetonius and Cassius Dio love spicy scandal. They're basically ancient gossip accounts with excellent Latin, so details get messy. But the big picture is solid. Capri is where Caligula learns how power behaves when it's bored. Imagine you're a traumatized teenager, and your new guardian is an emperor who's convinced everyone's plotting. The rules are simple. Don't stand out, don't trust anyone, and laugh politely at jokes that might be death threats. Great one, sir. Very funny. I also enjoy not being executed today. Caligula becomes a survival specialist. Ancient accounts suggest he mastered outward obedience, smiling, nodding, being the perfect little imperial houseguest, while internally watching how Tiberius runs the empire through terror and suspicion. Capri is like a masterclass in how to keep elites scared, how to weaponize accusations, and how to make loyalty feel like quicksand. But Caligula isn't just hiding, he's also building connections. The key one, the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards, basically the security team that can also decide who gets promoted to alive. He cultivates alliances quietly, especially with their leadership. And while Tiberius grows older and stranger and more isolated, Caligula is learning the most Roman lesson of all. The empire doesn't run on laws. It runs on who's holding the sword closest to the throne. Little Boot is still smiling, but he's not a mascot anymore. He's a student, and the final exam is coming. In 37 AD, Emperor Tiberius dies, and suddenly the empire needs a new face. The sources whisper about whether the end was helped along, but we don't need a murder mystery to understand the result. Caligula moves fast. There's a rival heir in the picture, Tiberius Gemellus, and Caligula quickly neutralizes the competition. The Praetorian Guard backs him, and at 24 years old, Little Boot becomes Emperor of Rome. The toddler mascot has been promoted to CEO of Earth's largest bureaucracy. And here's the wild part. The early reign is popular. Like, "We survived the nightmare, everybody clap" popular. Caligula ends or relaxes treason trials, restores some confiscated property, lowers certain taxes, boosts pay, and throws games and feasts that scream, "We're so back." The city treats him as the anti-Tiberius, younger, accessible, generous. For a moment, Rome believes the story it wants to believe, that trauma makes you wise, that suffering makes you merciful, that the system can magically heal itself because a new guy is smiling. But power doesn't just reward good intentions, it also removes friction. Nobody tells you no, and if they do, they might accidentally retire, permanently. Caligula is also carrying the psychological wreckage of his family's destruction. He grew up watching the empire punish people not for crimes, but for being inconvenient. Now he's emperor in a machine that's built to obey. It's like handing a flamethrower to someone who grew up in a house fire and saying, "Don't worry, it's symbolic." Still, Rome celebrates. Senators praise him. Crowds chant his name. And Caligula 1.0 looks like a success story, until late 37 AD, when he suffers a severe illness. Ancient writers describe a dramatic turning point. He recovers, and the vibe changes. The same city that cheered Little Boot is about to learn what happens when the boots get bigger and the limits disappear. After the illness in late 37 AD, the sources describe Caligula returning different. Now, historians debate what that means. Did sickness alter his behavior? Did it reveal what was already there? The safer takeaway is the political mask slips, and the relationship with Rome's elite starts turning into a horror comedy. Caligula begins clashing with the Senate, and not in a normal policy disagreement way, more like a public humiliation speed run. He taunts senators, tests loyalty, and makes power feel personal. Ancient writers record a particularly chilling theme. Some people, during his illness, supposedly made vows like, "May I die if you recover," which is the kind of dramatic statement you make when you assume the universe won't cash the check. Caligula, once recovered, allegedly takes those vows seriously. He forces some of those people to follow through, turning public devotion into a trap. Whether every detail is exact or not, the pattern matters. He starts using fear as a tool, not as an unfortunate side effect. And Rome has seen fear before under Tiberius, which is why this betrayal hits harder. Caligula wasn't supposed to be that. He was the bright future, the antidote, the charming survivor. Instead, he's showing that the system hasn't changed, only the personality running it. Meanwhile, Caligula's friendships start looking like temporary contracts. He removes allies, reshuffles influence, and makes it clear that closeness to him is not safety, it's exposure. Like standing near fireworks because you want to feel warm. The Senate, used to performing loyalty, now has to guess his mood daily. And Caligula? He's learning the most dangerous lesson absolute power teaches. If people fear you, you never have to wonder what they really think, because you can punish them for thinking it. Rome thought the nightmare ended. Turns out, it just changed outfits. Caligula's rule starts blending punishment with performance. Ancient accounts describe theatrical humiliations, sudden executions, and cruel games of status. Less government and more reality show hosted by a lightning bolt. It's important to stay careful here. Sources exaggerate, especially when later elites wanted to paint him as a monster. But even with that caution, multiple traditions agree on the core. Caligula cultivated dominance through spectacle and unpredictability. Senators are mocked. Powerful families are shaken down. People live in the anxious space between rumor and decree. And because Rome is Rome, the cruelty isn't always hidden. It's sometimes staged. The point isn't just to remove an enemy. The point is to remind everyone that the emperor can rewrite reality in public. Like, congratulations, you're guilty. Of what? Of asking questions. Then there are the famous stories, like the claim he planned to make his horse Incitatus a consul. That one might be exaggerated or misunderstood. Many historians interpret it as a deliberate insult to the Senate. You're so useless, I could replace you with a horse and governance would improve. Which, honestly, is a roast with hooves. Caligula also pushes an image of himself that blurs the line between ruler and divine figure. Roman emperors weren't strangers to cults of personality, but the sources portray Caligula leaning hard into godlike presentation, demanding honor, treating disagreement like sacrilege. Underneath all of it is a simple mechanism. When institutions can't stop a leader, that leader starts using the institutions as props. The Senate becomes a stage. The courts become a weapon. The crowd becomes an audience. And Caligula becomes the director, except he's directing a tragedy with slapstick timing. The empire is laughing less now, mostly because it's busy surviving. Spectacle isn't cheap. Games, feasts, gifts, building projects. Rome's imperial budget is not an infinite coin fountain, even if it sometimes pretends to be. As Caligula's extravagance grows, sources describe the treasury draining and the solution becoming extremely Roman. Take money from people who can't safely say no. Ancient writers portray him reviving harsh prosecutions and confiscations to fund spending. Again, details vary, and some accusations may be colored by political hostility. But the general pattern, financial stress leading to punitive extraction, fits how autocratic systems often behave. When applause costs too much, the state starts charging the wealthy for existing. It's like a subscription service. Premium tier includes not being accused of treason this month. This creates a feedback loop. The more Caligula spends on spectacle to project power, the more he needs resources. The more he extracts resources through fear, the more enemies he makes. The more enemies he makes, the more he needs spectacle to remind everyone he's untouchable. Rome becomes a snake eating its own sandals. And this isn't just about money. Confiscations and prosecutions weaponize uncertainty. If your wealth can be seized on a whim, you don't plan, you don't invest, you don't trust. So society becomes brittle. Everyone is scanning the room for threats instead of building anything lasting. Meanwhile, Caligula's inner circle becomes a danger zone. Former allies can be eliminated, not just for plotting, but for being inconvenient or too famous, or simply too close to yesterday's version of him. Loyalty turns into a game where the rules change daily and the prize is survival. By now, we've moved from Caligula 1.0 to Caligula 2.0, a ruler who treats the empire like a personal stage, financed by intimidation, staffed by frightened collaborators, and stabilized by the idea that resistance is impossible. Which is exactly when resistance becomes inevitable, because eventually, fear stops working on the people holding the knives. Now we enter the era of public stunts, where the empire's most powerful man uses state resources to settle what can only be described as cosmic beef. One famous story says Caligula built a bridge of boats across a bay, often associated with Baiae in the Bay of Naples, apparently to defy a prophecy or insult someone's prediction about what he would never accomplish. The exact motivations are debated, but the stunt itself shows the vibe. Reality is optional when you're emperor. Imagine calling your friend like, "Hey, I proved you wrong," and your friend says, "About what?" And you say, "I turned the ocean into a hallway." The point of stunts like this isn't infrastructure, it's domination through absurdity. Caligula's power isn't just that he can punish you, It's that he can force thousands of people to participate in his ego projects, and nobody can publicly call it wasteful. He's not building for Rome. He's building for the idea that Rome belongs to him. Meanwhile, the elite are watching the emperor spend like a storm god, while also squeezing the system for funds. The public gets entertainment, but also instability. The military gets paid, sometimes with bonuses, yet sees leadership behaving erratically. The Senate is humiliated, but still expected to clap. And here's the twist. These stunts can look silly, but they're also strategic. Spectacle distracts. Spectacle intimidates. Spectacle creates a shared reality where the emperor is the center of every story. If you control the story, you control what feels possible. Except, the more Caligula insists on being the main character, the more everyone else becomes a potential antagonist. And by now, Rome is full of people who are tired of being extras in a show where the director can rewrite the script by pointing at you. The ocean bridge flex is funny, until you remember the same hands funding it can also sign your death warrant for not laughing hard enough. At some point, Caligula reportedly gathers troops for a campaign toward Britain, and then, according to later accounts, has them collect seashells as spoils of war. This story might be exaggerated, mistranslated, or symbolic in ways we can't fully recover. But even if the literal shells are debated, the broader theme isn't. His leadership increasingly looks impulsive, theatrical, and disconnected from normal military logic. Armies are not props. They're expensive, proud, and armed. And when you treat them like extras in a comedy sketch, you gamble with the one institution that can either save your throne or remove it. The troops might enjoy bonuses and spectacle for a while, but they also notice when decisions feel arbitrary. And this is where Caligula's obsession with dominance becomes self-defeating. Dominance requires stability. If your commands feel like coin flips, people stop trusting the command structure. And when trust collapses, everyone starts quietly doing math. If the emperor is unpredictable, how long until I'm the punchline? Meanwhile, Caligula's image projects divine greatness, yet his actions invite ridicule. That mismatch is dangerous. A ruler can be feared or loved or respected, but being feared and mocked is the political equivalent of juggling knives on a unicycle. Eventually, somebody stops clapping and starts aiming. Ancient Rome also has a special talent for storing grudges like fine wine. Senators humiliated in public, officers whiplashed by weird orders, elites drained by confiscations, these are not isolated complaints. They're ingredients. By the end of this era, the empire feels like a room full of people pretending everything's fine because the host is holding a spear and calling it a party favor. Everyone is smiling. Nobody is relaxed. And somewhere in the background, conspiracies start to feel less like rebellion and more like workplace safety. When your emperor declares Seashells a victory, somebody eventually decides the real victory would be ending the show. Caligula's push toward divine self-presentation doesn't stay a Roman parlor trick. It ripples across the empire, where local traditions and religions are not optional accessories. Ancient accounts describe tensions in Judea over imperial honor demands, with the potential for major unrest. The exact contours are complex, and the sources reflect imperial politics as much as local realities, but the key point is clear. Forcing sacred issues becomes a match near dry hay. Empires survive by balancing ego with flexibility. Caligula, as portrayed by later writers, leans into ego, testing how far reverence can be demanded. Diplomacy and administrators reportedly help prevent a full catastrophe, but the fact that it gets close matters. It shows the empire's limits. You can confiscate property, stage games, insult senators, but when you threaten the spiritual foundations of provinces, you risk rebellion that doesn't care about your theater. And back in Rome, resentment hardens. The Senate hates being degraded. The elite fear being targeted. Even the Praetorian Guard, those king-making bodyguards, start realizing they're protecting a man who might eventually turn on them, too. In autocracies, the inner circle is always temporary. The knife that protects you today is also the knife that measures you tomorrow. Conspiracy becomes practical. Not necessarily because everyone suddenly becomes heroic Republicans, but because self-preservation kicks in. If the emperor is unpredictable and the system has no brakes, then the only brake left is removing the driver. So by 41 AD, you can feel the air change. Rome has seen tyrants. It has endured paranoia. But Caligula's blend of humiliation, confiscation, spectacle, and divine posturing is now pressing on every pressure point at once. When enough powerful people conclude the empire would be safer without you, your reign enters its final act. And Rome is very experienced at final acts. On January 24th, 41 AD, the conspiracy lands. Caligula is assassinated. Ancient sources describe a coordinated attack involving members of the Praetorian Guard and others, with motives ranging from personal grievance to political panic. Soon after, his wife and young daughter are also killed, because Roman power transitions were not known for their gentle HR offboarding. Rome wobbles. For a moment, the big question hangs in the air. Does the Republic return? Do the senators finally undo the imperial system? Do they finally uninstall the Absolute Power app? No, because the problem wasn't just Caligula, it was the structure. The Praetorian Guard, who had helped elevate him, moves to install Claudius as the next emperor. The Guard prefers a controllable emperor to a chaotic vacuum, and the Senate can't outmuscle the people with the swords. The empire survives by doing what it always does, replacing the face at the top while keeping the machine running. And that's the true punchline of Caligula. His reign becomes legendary for shocking stories. Some probably exaggerated, some misunderstood, some entirely plausible in a court built on fear. But the deeper warning is simpler. He began as a popular solution, a symbol that the nightmare was over. And then, in a system with no real limits, his trauma, his ego, his paranoia, and his power fused into something monstrous. Caligula isn't just remembered because he was awful. He's remembered because Rome built the kind of throne that manufactures awfulness when the wrong human sits down, and then acts surprised when the boots start stomping. So that's Caligula, the child mascot turned emperor, the hopeful reset that became a 4-year cautionary tale. Not because absolute power always creates monsters, but because it removes the speed limits, disables the airbags, and then asks the driver to be emotionally stable forever. If you enjoyed this trip through Rome's most chaotic leadership seminar, hit like, subscribe, and tell me who you want next. Another emperor, a weirder dynasty, or a historical figure whose biography reads like a warning label. And remember, if someone ever offers you unlimited authority and a private army, maybe ask for a therapist first.